Come on.
Nobody's perfect.
Matt's hand reaching to the camera.
Stay tuned, folks. 'Cause this one has got a lot of good stuff to say.
That was awful. No, I refuse to be childish and immature. But I'm glad you're here on our After Hours show where we take the internet by storm and we no longer take your questions because we took phone calls one night and you were so creepy that we couldn't sleep for about a week.
So weird.
So now we're just talking amongst ourselves. And there's a lot to cover. I mean, between the Ukraine and the damn plane. Do you guys, you were watching in the green room as we were finishing the show. What do you think happened with the Malaysian
I was on
flight?
Hannity earlier saying that I want it to be Muslims. And I'm not necessarily proud of that desire, but it's a feeling, so you can't get mad at a feeling.
Because you want people to be mad at Muslims, like they're not mad enough?
I think they're pretty sleepy when it comes to the threat of Islam. And Michael Moore, you know, after the Boston bombing, he wanted them to be rednecks. He wanted a Timothy
So did
McVeigh.
David Axelrod. And they said, well, it's Patriots Day here in Boston, and you know what that means.
Yeah.
Salon.com.
So I'm sort of as guilty as them because I have the same feelings on the other side. But my threat is real. Their threat is some dude with a trucker hat going, blow it up.
Yeah.
Well, that did happen once. in fairness.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind
Well,
of
let's
happened.
list
Okay,
that,
but why,
those times.
why would it be,
and-
okay,
sure.
but I mean, the way I understand it, and this may be an overly simplistic view, Islam and Islamists, as Lou Dobbs, my friend, an office mate, would call them, they tend to have a problem with the West. Why would they blow up a Chinese, a mostly Chinese-packed Malaysian
they're
flight
totally
going to
irrational.
Beijing?
And there's this myth that they hate us because of our foreign policy or something. They hate us because we're infidels, and the Quran says destroy all infidels. Who's harder on Muslims than Muslims? They're totally insatiable. I mean, you can have a burqa on in Saudi Arabia, and some guy's going to come up and go, really? Purple socks?
Yeah,
Are you kidding me?
You have the rifts within because, for instance, like Osama bin Laden wouldn't even go to horse races because the music was a violation of his moral compass, his moral code. So, you know, there's waging infidel against one another. So there's so many
You can't
factors
have a
within.
kitten calendar. Who knows what their beef with
That's
this
true.
plane was?
But they're so adorable.
Because God made those, and you're arrogant to think you can capture them with a photograph.
But I don't think either one of you believe, and I'm hoping that this is the case, that when something bad happens here or when Muslims are carrying out terrorist attacks, that stuff happens in a vacuum, that it's simply their philosophy, and that has nothing to do, as you were seemingly indicating, with U.S. foreign policy and the fact that we have bases in and we intervene in various places in the Middle East, and we do all sorts of stuff that doesn't actually concern us, that we don't open ourselves up.
Why do they attack Glasgow? Why do they attack Vancouver?
I'm just wondering if you really think that sort of stuff occurs in a vacuum.
I do.
It does. Okay.
I
think that foreign policy is a tiny fraction of their crazy inbred agenda.
I think you're trying
inbred
to
agenda.
Yeah,
That they're actually being inbred, and that is what there's some sort of genetic defect that is causing them to carry these attacks.
There's a huge problem with inbreeding in the Muslim community.
I find that such a bizarre argument. What percentage of Muslims or people from the Middle East are carrying out terrorist attacks?
Do you think
what a bizarre argument.
25%.
That doesn't even make any sense.
25% think suicide bombing is sometimes often justified. That's 250 million people.
Fair, I will rephrase two issues with what you have to say. Number one is you are applying rational thought to irrational behavior. All right, you are applying.
Actually, I haven't done that.
No, you are. You're saying that people are reacting to U.S. foreign policy. I'm actually suggesting. I'm actually suggesting. It's very irrational. It's a very irrational
suggesting
reaction.
that might be a part of what is happening.
It's almost like the bitch
here.
had to come in defense, which
that's not what I suggested at all. I'm only suggesting that it is a part of the overall calculus.
The other thing you
that
said
doesn't
is
seem
what is
absurd
the
either.
percentage of people in the Middle East who commit terrorist attacks? That's not what I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is of the terrorist attacks that are committed, how many of those are committed by non-Muslims?
And that's fine too. But I would say that that's probably the wrong way to look at the problem. In the same sense that it's the wrong way to look at the problem and say, oh well, most of the violence in this country is committed by people who happen to be minorities. It is preposterous and idiotic to then suggest that there is something defective in those people that is creating the crime. No one would posit that particular argument. I would actually dare anyone at the table to do it.
But I don't think it's a genetic component because
there's another argument.
No, I think.
But that's actually what Gavin said.
Okay, but
so that's what I addressed.
I think I mean, Gavin, you're on a slippery slope because that does get pretty racist pretty quick.
It's apples and oranges. I don't have to jump there. I'm talking about inbreeding.
People say apples and oranges.
Muhammad said you can marry your first cousin. Yeah. That is not only a huge problem in Pakistan and throughout the Middle East. It's actually a problem in India because they do it to preserve the family money. Now, you do that once or twice, it's not great. You do that for 40 generations, and it starts dictating the behavior of an entire group of people. And out of Islam, all Muslims, I've seen studies that say about 25% think that suicide bombing is sometimes or often justified. That's a lot of people.
Can you find any other bizarre behavior that you could relate to inbreeding?
Oh,
that is happening
if you look up inbreeding,
at a statistically disproportionate,
totally mirror extremist Islam.
Yeah, I'm talking.
Irrational behavior, violent behavior.
How about specifically amongst this population, more broadly? Because even if you can say that some percentage of those people support this behavior, we're still talking about a minority of people who fit these characteristics.
Huge birth defect problems, huge health problems. Even the Muslims in Britain are having incredible genetic problems from this, diseases.
No, I think you both are entirely off base. I think what Kennedy said, I think you're trying to apply rational thought to rational behavior.
I'm not doing that. I've already defended myself
one of the best characterizations of this.
I've done it ably.
Okay, but here's the other thing that, to speak to your point. What about, people like John What's-His-Fart, who converted to Islam in this country is
Johnny
a form...
Walker Lind, yeah.
Yeah, John Walker Lind. Yeah, people who convert to Islam as a form, like the most extreme form of rebellion. I mean, it's really not too dissimilar from what Chris McCandless did, hiking into the Alaskan wilderness and dying of starvation after however many.
It's also not too dissimilar from the radical anarchists.
There are people who, are not inbred. They are not Middle Eastern. They are whitey birds or from other parts of the world who don't share whatever genetic components or.
Of course, we're talking about a billion people. I'm talking about a general pattern. Of course, there's John Walker Lind and people who mimic this extremist behavior because they're extreme.
Well, philosophical radicalism can manifest itself in very violent ways. We've actually seen this in this country before. This very country with the anarchists of the 1920s that era who were blowing themselves up. Not in Wall Street, mind you. That was one of the for a number of years. I'm telling you that there was an ideology that bound a bunch of people together. They actually migrated to this ideology, as John Walker Lind did, and they were carrying out attacks. This thing can actually fuel and breed itself and feed upon itself.
I'm talking about hundreds of millions of people.
But again, it's not an inherent defect.
If we want an explanation, I think there were a lot of seeds to truth. Samuel Huntington, Clash of Civilizations. We are seeing Western values conflicting with extreme radicalism. There are seeds of extreme radicalism, not in most Muslims, absolutely not, but in a certain sect, and that's what we're seeing. It's a clash of civilizations.
And that much I'm willing to accept, that there is a fundamentally defective philosophy that's being advanced amongst some people. But what I was confronting originally was, Gavin, frankly, the point that you made. There's a huge genetic
component to this, too.
Yeah, I think that's not...
That doesn't mean you have to apply eugenics to every single problem in the world.
Well, eugenics is bad science, so I'm glad that you wouldn't do that.
But we can say inbreeding is bad, and if it makes you feel more comfortable, I can give you
I'm willing to take a stand against inbreeding with you right now.
And Muslims saying that, no, you can't marry your first cousin. This is causing serious diseases. It's causing all kinds of health problems, and it's making a big portion of us nuts.
But it also sounds irrational and racist when it's not backed up with concrete scientific evidence.
The inbreeding thing, I can back up with so much evidence that it would be like you'd rather read the Obamacare 1,500-page report.
I think it's so much more cultural than anything else, and that Islam hasn't gone through its reformation. We are not just the biggest target on the block, but we're the biggest target in the history.
The problem with that...
No, wait, I'm fine. I'm fine here. The problem is you've been talking for the last 8 minutes. This is, I agree with you, the primary source of terrorism happening right now, and has been for the last 20 years, 25 years, and it's something to be done, and you should be able to confront that with open eyes and be fine with it. also, blowback, I think, does play a role as well. The Defense Science Board, which studies this crap for the U.S. government under Cheney and Bush, who were the last people in the world to admit this kind of stuff, had a whole thing about blowback and its role in these kind of things. When you put yourself forward as the biggest kid on the block with all of these armaments and you're getting in people's business for good and for ill, for Muslims and against Muslims, people are just going to fixate on you regardless of whether you're guilty or you're innocent of the crimes that they accuse you of committing.
The problem with that argument is a picture of Iran in 1960. There's a woman in a miniskirt in a lab studying chemistry. There's another beautiful lady driving a car. They are the only culture that has gone backwards in time. So to say these are just growing pains.
The Chinese did it as well when they went to a centralized form of government.
Of their society.
Have you seen Hiroshima
and Nagasaki recently?
They look
Are you
like
familiar with the Shah of Iran?
Do you think U.S. foreign policy?
I'm just saying,
Trump's ongoing effort to anger everyone on the planet with his proposed Muslim immigration plan has extended to the Pentagon, British Prime Minister David Cameron, and even J.K. Rowling. She wrote, "How horrible. Voldemort was nowhere near as bad." Yeah. Now, here to sort out Mr. Trump, it's the party panel tonight. We've got Jedediah Bila, Fox News contributor, Gavin Mcinnes, host of The Gavin Mcinnes Show, and the voice of reason, Matt Welch, editor-in-chief of Reason Magazine. Welcome on, party panel.
Thanks for having us.
Great button, Gavin.
Thank you very much. Make America great.
I never know where you stand, but I'm curious to learn tonight. So let's just focus a little bit on the impracticality of this program. Let's pretend that it's going to work, that it's enforceable, and that it's going to happen. What are some of the problems implementing it?
Okay, so the border guard will say, "All right, Mr. Hakeem Olajuwon, are you a Muslim?" And he will say, "Yeah." And they'll say, "Sorry, go play basketball somewhere else." Now, Beardy McTerrorist, are you a Muslim? What's Beardy McTerrorist going to say?
Nein.
Exactly.
Yep.
In the original German, and he's going to come in.
Yep.
So it kind of doesn't make sense to have it as a question. Meanwhile, we have visa waiver agreements with 38 countries. That means people from 38 countries can come into this country without a visa.
Yeah.
About 20 million people a year do that. The countries with which we have those agreements would rip those up in that situation, because you're talking about significant Muslim populations in France and England and Germany and a bunch of other places. Yeah. And suddenly this visa waiver program is not worth anything. So that means Americans won't be able to go to those countries without applying for a visa. This is the world that we would live in.
Well, that kind of sucks. I'm going to go buy some good fromage en France. Gavin, Matt makes perfect sense. This whole plan actually makes us less safe.
That's the problem with you people. You're pontificators. Everything is academic. Ivory tower salons. We're drinking brandy.
God forbid logic and
practical. No, you're all hypotheticals. You know, it's like you just said, there's a motion to round up all the minions in Times Square because they're all illegal aliens. And then you guys go, well, anyone can wear a minion costume. Anyone who's at Times Square knows all the minions are illegals. They don't speak any English. So we can pontificate here, but we know that when a jihadist goes abroad and comes back, and he was only in Syria for 2 weeks, we know that he was there being trained. The shoe bomber, all 4 of the London bombings, the guy who killed the war memorial dude in Canada. Almost every homegrown jihadist spent some time in Pakistan, spent some time in Syria. Now, his plan is pretty extreme,
it sounds like it's a geographic issue. That's not an issue of whether or not someone has claimed a certain religion. That's not a question of whether or not people are Muslim. That's a question of where people have gone, for how long, and what has happened to them.
Yeah,
and how
I understand. Trump is crass and rude and irrational, but that's what we need right now. We need hate. We need fear-mongering. We are so worried about Muslims' feelings after all these attacks that we want to keep it academic and keep it hypothetical and say, well, what if someone was a professional ball player or an academic? Can he not come here? Yeah. Look, we'll have to have some collateral damage, but right now, we don't want another London bombing.
That's not collateral damage.
You're coming back.
The Constitution is not collateral damage.
The Constitution is for Americans.
Right. You were just talking about Americans' homegrown terrorists.
No, those are traitors. That's capital punishment.
You just said homegrown.
No,
that means
if you were a traitor, the penalty is death.
Right.
So you're no longer an American citizen. If you're going to train for jihad, you're going to learn how to kill us.
You're convicted of treason.
Traitor.
You want to rip up due process, totally, for American citizens, and that position...
Due process. We're so worried about the Constitution and due process in a
war.
Don't be mean to the Japanese in 1943. You might hurt their feelings.
No, you might violate the rights of American citizens who were not Japanese, which is what happened.
Look,
which
they
Donald
should
Trump
be happy
said,
they're not in internment
right.
camps, okay? You can keep your land, but you can't be gallivanting off to Syria every 2 weeks.
It's been very useful, going back to Voldemort, to see Trump come out because it's like it brings out the Death Eaters in people these days.
See, he's actually a Harry Potter reader. Very good. Jedediah, please.
The problem is that that's not what America stands for. You know, America is supposed to be a place that you know, cares about freedom of religion, that cares about welcoming people in, that is able to distinguish a potential terrorist and a potential threat from someone who's just practicing their religious beliefs. Are we now going to, every time we're faced with a minority of a religious group that's doing something outrageous, whatever it may be, are we supposed to be discriminating against an entire group of people? For him to say, ban all Muslims, I mean, it could be another religious group in the future doing something.
America is not about feelings, okay? I didn't immigrate here for feelings.
But
no one's actually talking about
feelings. It's about kicking ass.
But it's about rights. People have the right to be of a certain religion.
German rights in 1943.
But not all Muslims.
Everyone wear lederhosen in 1943.
The problem is not all Muslims are the enemy, and you're catering to an argument that then hands President Obama and hands folks on the left the opportunity to say Republicans hate all Muslims, when that's not true. That's not what's happening. We hate radical Muslim extremists.
What percentage are radical?
People. Not all of them.
Of course not all of them. Let's try some math, though.
That's what he's saying.
60% think suicide bombing is sometimes or often justified.
That number,
600 million people.
That is an absolute garbage number. That number emanates from Frank Gaffney. Listening to Frank Gaffney's stats about Muslims in America is like listening to Bernie Sanders' stats
in America,
about climate change.
If you do 18 to 25,
actually, no, there's and I know you don't want to believe this because you want to point to some Somalis in Minneapolis, but American Muslims are actually better assimilated than Muslims in any other part of the world.
Oh, yeah, they're better assimilated than Saudis or Pakistanis or Syrians or Somalians.
Or France or England or any other country. We assimilate immigrants here. Even knuckle-dragging, punk-rock Canadians somehow manage to become part of the American firmament here, and that's one of the reasons.
American firmament? That's what I came for. I'm looking around. Where'd it go?
Yeah, but you want to sacrifice the American firmament. Right. You have no respect for the rule of law or the Constitution when it's convenient for you.
You have taken the rule of law and put it into this academic ivory tower where we talk about hypotheticals.
Wants to amend the Constitution. No, God forbid a leftist wants to amend the Constitution and take away your Second Amendment rights. Then all of a sudden, everyone on the right is a constitutional scholar. You can't have it both ways. You're either taking all of it consistently or go back to Canada.
They're already invading my First Amendment and my Second Amendment. I want both of the two First Amendments, please. Both of them are being censored by feelings.
Donald Trump doesn't have any kind of respect for the Second Amendment. He has no respect for the Fourth Amendment or the Fifth Amendment either. Loves eminent domain. He wants to put everybody on watch lists and deprive their Second Amendment rights.